Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 2 of the class. I almost said week 1. It's not week 1, it's week 2, but it's week 1 of music materials. So congrats on making it through the last week. And by now you've gone through all the orientation materials. You went through the module that talks about neural nostalgia and how we learn and netiquette and all those important things. And so hopefully that puts you on a good gives you a good foothold for the materials going forward. So normally on these videos, what I'm doing is I'm setting up the context. So I'm kind of framing the materials for the upcoming week for you. I'm not teaching you on the video. You don't want to watch me do that. The materials are all there. That's why we're doing an asynchronous online class. But I do have to frame things, put the context, add some things in. And I try to keep these videos around 15 minutes or so. But then you can go through the materials as you need to. I do want to point out a couple of things as we move forward and get into these. So first of all, as I have mentioned multiple times, there is a textbook for this class, and the book is important. When I'm asked, first of all, for the quizzes, a lot of your stuff's going to come from there, and the big tests that you're going to take. But also, when I'm asking you certain questions in the discussions and in the reflection observations, it is often directly correlated to what it is that you're learning out of the book and then the support materials here in Canvas. So it's important that you have the book. I have had students try to pass this class or do well in this class without the book, and I can say that it is a challenge. If you're going for an A, you pretty much can't do it without the book, because I'm asking you questions that are drawing from the materials, and so it's going to be hard to get a good grade on those. Yeah, I know that there's stuff out there and things like that, and that's why I periodically change up questions and I do things like that. So I'll get to that in a second. So one, it's really important that you have the book. How you get it is up to you. Rent it, buy it, rent it just for the class, do whatever you need to do. That's your call. Whoops, sorry, little bounce there. Do whatever you need to do to get the book. I do know it's out there. I did have, again, a student that asked me if 7th edition is okay. The 7th edition is probably okay, but keep in mind that the 7th edition is different. Most of the differences are at the end, although there are a few things that are changed, either things that were dropped off or added. So I'm not going to give you a guarantee and say, oh yeah, you'll be totally fine. You'll probably be mostly okay. Again, if you're going for an A in the class, I don't know that I would do that. If you're going to pass the class, then that's a different story. However, if you're in here just to pass the class, then you're going to be missing out on a lot of stuff. But I'm not going to rant about that. So I do have a few things. Book announcements. You've already seen now that I send out announcements. So typically, this last week was a little different. Typically, I will send an announcement out on Thursday and an announcement out on Sunday. So Thursday morning, Sunday morning. The Thursday morning one usually goes out at 8 o'clock. Sunday morning one goes out at 9 o'clock. And that's just like your reminder of hey, here's the things that are due today. So your main due dates are those 2 days. Thursdays by noon, your welcome video assignment is due. That's like this assignment, right? And so you're doing that. I want it done by noon because you need to answer the discussion prompt. And to answer the discussion prompt, you need to go through all the materials because the module's not going to unlock, but also the book and the modules inform what you're going to do. And yeah, I know that you can just click through things. I understand that. One thing I also know that you may not know is I know how much time you're spending online. So there's a page that I look up that shows me every person by name and how much time they've been online. Are there ways to game that too? Of course, right? But I mean, if you're doing the education and trying to figure out ways to game the situation, here's my advice: just learn. That's the way to do this, right? Just learn the material and do that. So it's important that you read the announcements that I send out. Sometimes I'll send out and I'll put important, please read. I did one this last week, only half the class read the announcement. Occasionally, I will drop in extra credit points. It'll be just like, hey, if you saw this, reply with whatever, and you'll get 10 free points. So, but if I'm putting something out there, it's for your benefit, not for mine. I already know all of those. So read those. Another thing, I always or almost always comment on assignments. If you're doing a good job and things are great, I will just say, hey, good job, nice job, whatever. If there are issues, then I'm doing that as well. So make it a habit to read my comments. Set it up in your settings so that you get notified when when I've posted a comment. It's just, again, for your benefit. So sometimes I'm saying, hey, I had a student, this is a true story, like in was it last semester or the semester before, that was totally doing the wrong thing every time, or was just really doing the bare minimum. And I would keep replying, what are you doing? Are you reading my comments? I'm trying to help you. Obviously, that student didn't care, but I was trying to reach out, and they never got back. So to that also, I would say, make sure that if I message you in Canvas, which doesn't happen often, but if I message you in Canvas, make sure that you read those as well. And then the last thing is plagiarism. So you know what plagiarism is. There was a section in there, but as we get into the materials, there are always students that will plagiarize. They will go look online. They will try to find either the answers to my assignments, which again, I do sometimes mix them up a little bit. And I know when that's happening. And in fact, on your reflection observations, it runs it through Turnitin. If you get caught plagiarizing, the first time you get a 0 on that assignment, and then you get a warning. The second time you get an F in the class and you're reported to the college, right? In higher education, there is no tolerance for plagiarism, just like in life, right? You've got to do good work and do honest work. So I'm just putting that out here as well, because now that we get in the material, sometimes people get tempted. They wait till the last minute, they do whatever, and then they'll plagiarize, and I can almost always find them. So just don't plagiarize, okay? So those are the main things that I wanted to go over. I won't go over those every time, but just to get you all on the same page. So get the book, read the announcements, read the comments, don't plagiarize. Good? Golden. All right. Now, we're going to get into the material this week, and there's a few other weeks in the course of the semester where you'll have 2 chapters in a week. One of these chapters is shorter. Chapter 2 is not that long. But so that means that in the assignments, you'll have 2 quizzes, but you'll still just have 1 discussion, 1 reflection, observation. So chapters 1 and 2 are going to be this week. Chapter 1 is on the roots of rock and roll. And then chapter 2 is a continuation of that with urban blues and rhythm and blues. So a few things about the roots of rock and roll. As you've already heard me say, we're only a week in. Nothing exists in a vacuum. There are influences coming from all over the place. And so it's important that we understand where the influences are coming from. So I'm going to spend a little time just setting that up for you. Some of it's in the book and not. But it's like history, like all of history. There's rough patches, and there's good things and there's bad things, and they often happen at the same time. And that's how it goes. And so you think about all this amazing music that we have. And if you go back to the roots of what becomes rock and roll, rhythm and blues, and then rock and roll, you're really dealing with 2 things. One, you're dealing with the idea of harmonies and melodies from Western Europe. So you had people that came here, going back to, to Plymouth Rock, going back to the 1600s. And they came over from England, right? And then eventually they came over from other places as well. But they brought their music with them. So they didn't show up here and go, oh yeah, we need music. They played music. They played songs. They had what they grew up. Remember, here's an important thing to think about too. All music up until about 140 years ago or so, and certainly 100 years ago, was live. Okay, all music, always. The recorded history of music started in the 1880s, really, but it didn't become a big thing until the 1910s, 1920s. that started to become easily available. So everything was live. So what you have in the music that came over, you have with the folk songs, the ballad songs that came over from the UK, from Western Europe, that eventually ended up manifesting themselves in the music of Stephen Foster, who you're going to learn about, who's got a bit of a checkered history as well, because he wrote songs for the minstrelsy and minstrelsy, and you're going to read about that and learn about that, because minstrel songs it was tough. It was not cool. And this is one of the other things, is we're going to be dealing with race in this class a lot. And so it's an important component from the beginning of the class all the way through, because the other component that is an essential ingredient to the music that we are studying is the music that came here by way of Africa, the music that came by way of the slave trade that came here through the British, through the Dutch, through the French, and made its way here to North America, and as people owned slaves, and as the slaves heard the music of the white folks that were here, those that were made to go to church, those that were made to do, that would hear that music being played around them, and also in many cases they were not allowed to perform or even play the music of, and by perform I mean like concerts versus or public performances, or even play the music of their culture, right? So that was forbidden in a lot of places. There was a period in New Orleans, there was a very famous area in New Orleans way back when called Congo Square, and on, I believe it was Sundays, they were allowed to perform their the music and dance of their culture. It's important to understand too, when we're going in this, the slave trade is one of these blights on history, but it's always been here. And I'm not excusing it in any way, but it's important to understand the context. It's also important, I hear about, people that are talking about, you'll hear people talk about, slaves in the United States and all of that. And certainly slavery still existed when that happened, but it's important to understand that for the first 150 years of the slave trade in North America, there was no United States. It was British colonies, it was French colonies, if you're talking about the South. There was the Dutch slave trade, there was the British slave trade, there was all of that. So when you're talking about that history, it's very easy to say, oh, the United States is bad because they brought slavery here. No, they didn't. It was already here when all of that started to form. Doesn't justify it, doesn't make it right. But this is why we study history, and this is why you're in a history class, right? So we learn about these things. It's important to understand that, and you've probably heard the saying that the reason we study history is so that we don't repeat mistakes, right? That's the goal, is that we learn and we grow from these things. There are actually more slaves right now than there ever have been. Particularly through sex trafficking. So it is still going on. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But you get people that are greedy and want power and all those things, and they're going to always take advantage of the disenfranchised or the less fortunate or those that are viewed inferior, although you and I know right now that they're not. But that's what power and greed and corruption does. So that is the foundation of the music that we're learning about. And thankfully, that struggle, that tension that comes out of this, it stays with it. It's still there today, right? I'm going to ask you a lot in your assignments. Do you see examples today of, whatever? I can guarantee you that if I'm asking that question, there are examples. If you don't know, it just means that you're not looking hard enough, or you're not paying attention, or you're not making the connections. If I ever ask you about certain styles of music and you're not sure what I'm talking about, make sure that you're listening to the playlists. In fact, that's something I didn't mention along with the book. Make sure that you start off every chapter listening to the Spotify playlist. Make sure that you're getting that music in your head, that you're hearing it, because it's all about the music. To take this class and to not listen to the music would just be pointless. That's the whole beauty of the class. And you hopefully will find some artists that you are new to you that you really dig on. So, okay. So out of that, you're going to have these influences that they come together. You're going to learn about Tin Pan Alley, which was the music songwriting business that came out of New York in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and then it had a resurgence in the 50s. But you're going to learn about Tin Pan Alley and how that worked, how they wrote songs for vaudeville, how they wrote songs for that ended up becoming in musicals, and things like that. You're going to learn about the beginnings of jazz, which developed in New Orleans. You're going to learn about ragtime, which really kind of was at the same time and influenced. And ragtime is an interesting music because it was very influenced by African rhythms, but Western harmonies. You maybe have already heard the music of Scott Joplin before. If you've been around on Main Street on Disneyland or other things like that, it's quite likely that you've heard it. But you're going to learn about that. Also, one other thing that's important to understand. So Scott Joplin in, I think it was 1899, his piece of music, The Entertainer, which you'll hear, Maple Leaf Rag, like sold over 1 million copies. Now, when you read that, there weren't recordings of that. That didn't exist in that way yet. So what that means is it's sheet music. So when you talk about music publishing earlier in our history, like in the early 1900s and all that, in late 1800s, you're mostly talking about music, printed sheet music. And so, that's what they're talking about. It's not till later that the recordings come in, and I'm going to spend time talking probably next week more about like records and things like that. But what y'all call vinyls, that's a little bit different too. So we'll get into that. I'll explain it a little bit and how that works through from the early stuff to now. So you're going to learn about the beginnings of jazz out of New Orleans because that's where it came from. You're going to learn about ragtime, and then you're going to learn about swing, which was an extension of jazz. And then you're going to learn about the blues, and the blues was a totally different thing. The blues was a rural music. It was a folk music. And you're going to learn about different aspects of the blues. You're going to learn about country blues, Delta blues, classic blues, and what makes them similar and what makes them different. The main similarities is that there was a chord progression known as a 12-bar blues, and it's a specific chord progression. So you're going to learn about that and how it functioned in the South and how it worked from the South. The other thing that's important as markers to be mindful of in this class, and I may have mentioned this in the last one, is wars, right? The main wars. And I know that oftentimes, when you're in high school or college, you study history like war to war, and often it leaves things out. But they are important markers, and they do change landscapes. So you have World War II, that's 1914 to 18. You have the Civil War, which is 1861 to 1865. So Stephen Foster, who you'll learn about, I mean, he was around during that time. Then you hear about World War I. World War II, which was 1939 to 1945. We got involved in 1941. And then there's a Korean War, and then there's a Vietnam War, and those were the major significant impacts. So you'll learn about that as you go through class. But as a result of World War I, a lot changed. There was slavery, there was the elimination of slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation and the work. And again, this was a long, ongoing process. So it wasn't just a thing that happened one day. I'm sure you've heard plenty of history about it. And so what happens is, people had freedom to move. They didn't have to stay on the plantations. They didn't have to stay wherever they were working. And so we started to see this first migration really around that, and then World War I. And so you started having people that started moving out of the South to different areas, and they often went where work was, and where work was typically in the big cities. So in the period from World War I to World War II, you had this migration of people that moved to places like Kansas City, Detroit, Chicago, New York, and then they brought their music with them. And that'll get us into chapter 2, where you'll learn about urban blues and Chicago blues. And you're going to learn about Chess Records, which was extremely important. The thing about a lot of this music, and we'll go more into detail in the book, as well, was that a lot of this music, these black artists that were doing blues and variations on blues, things like that, they would never get signed to the major record labels. And at that time, there was only like 3 or 4 of them. So they would get signed up by small independent record labels. So you would have things like chess records and things like imperial records and stacks and volt eventually and all of these things. So they would come up that way. So you're going to learn about chess records. So if you ever heard the term indie band means, if you didn't know this, an indie band is a band that's not signed to a major label. They're signed to an independent label, meaning they don't have the resources of the big label. That's what indie means. But the independent labels went back far. And so Chess Records is really one of the first important indie labels. So you're going to learn about those things. So take the time. Here's my thing, right? Make sure you, hopefully, ideally, you're watching these on Monday and Tuesday. You're doing this assignment. It will unlock the material. Listen to the music, read the book, go through the online materials. That's the way to do this. Then thoughtfully and meaningfully go through the assignments and do good work. Take the time. If you're ever unsure on something, reach out to me. Message me in Canvas if you have questions and I'll get back to you. I know that I say it usually takes 24 hours, but I'll try to get back to you quicker. I don't suggest that you leave messages for me in the comments of something because I won't necessarily see that. It's always best if you message me specifically in Canvas. Then I will definitely see it. Okay? I think that's it. Have a great week. Have a great week. It's crazy weather. It's been hot. It feels like summer and it's going to get cool again. But enjoy it. Get outside. Get some sunshine. Also, don't forget about that concert report. That thing will go live this week. It may be live by the time you watch this. So you're going to need to watch a concert online. Video, YouTube, Vimeo, whatever. You're going to need to watch it and write about it. So that'll unlock and you can read what you need to do for that. If you have questions about that as well, reach out to me. It's in all your materials too. This went on a little bit longer, but it's okay. It's we got to get things established. I won't reiterate all the stuff like I did at the top with this, and we'll continue to talk just more on the materials. Okay, that's it. Have a great week. Talk to you later.